Domi had the breakfast bag in one hand and her keys in the other, and she was in a good mood. That was the part she kept coming back to afterward. She was actually in a good mood. She had gone out early, bought food from the place on the corner that Tobina always said was too expensive, and she had done it because she wanted to. Not because it was an occasion, just because it was Wednesday and she felt like it. She unlocked the door, pushed it open, walked into her own apartment and stopped. Tobina was in the bed she had picked out, the bed she had moved across the city for. He was not alone. 4 seconds passed. She counted them later and could not explain why she counted, only that her brain needed something to do while it processed what her eyes were delivering. She walked to the counter. She set the breakfast bag down, carefully, slowly. She straightened it so the corners were square against the edge. Then she turned around and looked at him. She looked at the woman. She said, "Checkout is in 10 minutes," and she walked back out the door. She did not scream. She did not throw a single thing. She did not cry until she was on the train, and even then it was only 3 seconds because she was not going to fall apart in public. She pressed her fingers under her eyes, breathed out through her mouth, and then said out loud to no one, "He bought that bedding. He picked that pattern. I said it was ugly and he said it was modern." Man across from her looked up from his phone. She didn't care. She kept talking. 3 years, I paid half that security deposit. I put my name on the lease. Woman 2 seats down shifted slightly toward the window. "Not crazy," Domi said. I need to say it out loud or I will lose my mind." She arrived at work still holding herself together with both hands. She sat at her desk, turned on her computer, answered 2 emails, and was then called into the glass-walled office by Priscilla. Priscilla, who Domi had trained, who had sat next to Domi for 6 months learning every system, every process, every shortcut, who was now sitting on the other side of a desk with an expression that wanted to be apologetic but kept sliding into something more like relief. "We're doing a restructure," Priscilla said. "The decision came from above me. I want you to know that." "Sure," Domi said. "It's nothing personal, Domi. You've been incredibly. I don't need the speech." She said it without heat, without tears, without anything. "Just tell me the date." "Of the month, 2 weeks. There was a packet. HR would be in touch." Domi carried her box to the elevator. It was a small box. She had not been there long enough to accumulate much. A mug that said "Good morning," a small cactus she had named Gerald, a framed photo of her mother, a cardigan she kept for late shifts. She pressed the button, rode down in silence, walked back out into the morning. She went back to the apartment because she needed her hands busy. Packing was something to do. She could not afford to sit still and think about the math yet, so she would pack and then she would think. The eviction notice was taped to her door. She stood in the hallway and read it once. Then she read it again because the first time she thought she had misread it. She had not misread it. Landlord selling the building. 30 days to vacate. She did the math. The math was a closed door. She went inside. She packed what fit into the same box she had carried out of the office. Gerald the cactus went in. The Good Morning mug went in. She put her mother's photo on top so it wouldn't get scratched. She zipped her 2 bags, put them by the door, and carried everything downstairs and sat on the curb. She did not have money for a hotel. She had $32 in her checking account and 14 days until her last paycheck, and no one she could call who would not make this worse by knowing. Her mother would panic. Her cousin Enkechai would turn it into a sermon. Her friend Jada would show up with wine and good intentions, and Domi would spend the night taking care of everyone else's feelings about her disaster. So she sat on the curb, with the box and the bags, with Gerald and the mug, with an eviction notice folded in her back pocket, and a face that had moved completely past crying into something flat and hollow. It was not even noon. A black town car turned the corner and slowed. It pulled up to the curb directly in front of her and stopped. Domi looked at it. She looked down at Gerald. She said quietly, "I have never seen that car in my life." Door opened, and what happened next would alter the course of Domi's life in a way she could have never imagined. Dear viewers, welcome. If you're new here, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our community. Also drop a comment telling us what time you came across this video. Now, sit tight and let's dive in. The woman who stepped out was small and immaculate. She wore a pale green jacket, the kind that looked like it had been pressed that morning by someone who took the job seriously, and low block heels that she moved in carefully, one step at a time, like she was conserving something. She was old, not frail old, just old in a way that made you aware of how much time she had lived through. She looked at Domi on that curb and her whole face changed. Not pity, not concern, recognition. Like she had been looking for something and had just found it sitting exactly where she expected. She walked over and sat down beside Domi on the curb. Did not ask, did not hesitate, just sat like the two of them had made this arrangement weeks ago and she was simply keeping it. "Why are you sitting outside?" she said. Her English was careful, lightly accented. "You'll catch cold." "I'm okay," Domi said. I'm waiting for something." The woman nodded like that made complete sense. Then she patted Domi's hand. "Junho has been waiting too. The house is too quiet with just him." Domi looked at her. "I'm sorry, my grandson." She said it like Domi should already know. "I always told him find someone warm, someone who laughs." She looked at Domi with complete certainty. "I knew when I saw you." "Ma'am," Domi kept her voice gentle. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't know your grandson. I don't know anyone named Junho. I'm not who you think I am." Woman looked at her. Then she smiled, patient, unbothered, the way someone smiles when they're waiting for you to catch up. "You're cold," she said. "Come." "Can't come with you. I really can't. You don't know me. I'm a stranger." "You are not a stranger." She said it like a fact. Not to argue, not to convince, just a fact. A knock on the front passenger window. The driver, without any visible instruction, cracked the window and held out a wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water. Domi stared at it. She had not eaten since yesterday. She had $32 and nowhere to sleep, and a cactus named Gerald in a cardboard box. The car had tinted windows and leather seats, and she could feel the heat coming out of the open door from 3 feet away. She took the sandwich. She told herself she was only doing that much, just the sandwich. Then she got in the car. "Okay," she said, mostly to herself, as the door closed. "Okay. I don't know this woman. I don't know where we're going. This is textbook how people disappear and nobody finds them." She unwrapped the sandwich. It was good. Of course it was good. "I'm getting in a car with a stranger because she offered me a sandwich. My mother's going to be devastated." The old woman Baki, her name was Baki, she had introduced herself twice, and both times Domi had been mid-monologue, held Domi's hand, and hummed something low and old, something that had no beginning Domi could identify. The driver did not react to a single word Domi said. They passed through gates. Domi stopped mid-sentence. The house on the other side was not a house. It sat back from the driveway behind a stretch of lawn that made Domi aware of every item currently in her cardboard box. She pressed her face slightly toward the window and said, "Absolutely not." Baki patted her hand. The foyer was marble and quiet and tall, and Domi stood in the middle of it holding her box like a shield, calculating exits. There was the front door she had just come through. There was a hallway to the left. There were stairs. She could thank this woman, explain one more time very carefully, and leave. She was mid-plan when she heard the voice, low, controlled. Someone talking on a phone with the ease of a man who made calls like this all day and had never once been caught off guard. He came around the corner without looking up, still mid-sentence, phone to his ear, the kind of posture that happened when being composed became muscle memory. He was tall. He was well-dressed without trying to show it. He stopped walking when he cleared the hallway and registered that the foyer was not empty. Baki made a sound, small, pure, delighted, and crossed to him. She took his free hand in both of hers and turned back to Domi, and her face was the face of someone who had just delivered the best news of the year. "Your wife is here," she said to him. "I told you she would come." Foyer went completely silent. Junho looked at Domi. Domi was holding a box with a cactus in it. She mouthed, "I am so sorry," because there was nothing else available. He ended the call. He looked at his grandmother's face, lit up, completely settled, more present and clear than Domi had any context to measure but could tell mattered. And then he looked back at Domi. Something moved behind his eyes. He locked it back down immediately. But it had been there. And Domi, standing in a stranger's foyer with a cactus and an eviction notice and nowhere else to go, had absolutely no idea what any of this was about to cost her. Junho send her away, or will one look at his grandmother's face change everything? Junho moved toward his grandmother slowly, the way you approach something fragile. He kept his voice low and even. "Halmoni," he said, "you must be tired, let me take you upstairs." Baki looked at him, then she looked at Domi, then back at him, and something shifted in her face, not anger, just confusion. The kind that comes when something you were sure of starts to feel uncertain. "But she just got here," she said. "She'll still be here in the morning, I promise. Let's get you settled first." He reached for her hand gently. She let him take it for 1 second. Then she pulled back and the confusion deepened, and it moved fast, faster than Domi expected, from confusion into distress, into something that was genuinely frightening to witness in a woman her age. Her eyes went wide. Her breathing changed. She started looking around the foyer like she didn't recognize it anymore. "Where is she going?" Baki's voice had gone thin. "She can't leave. She just got here." "Why is everyone always leaving?" "Halmoni, where is she going?" She said it again, louder, and her hand came out searching, and Domi, without planning it, without thinking it through at all, stepped forward and took it. Baki stopped, just like that, like a switch. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders came down. She looked at Domi's hand holding hers, and then she looked up at Domi's face, and she smiled like everything was exactly right with the world. "There," she said softly. "Good." Junho stood 2 feet away and watched this happen without saying a word. His face gave nothing, but he stood there for a long time before he finally looked away. Baki went to bed at 9. One of the staff, a quiet woman named Mrs. Yoon, who had apparently been with the household for 11 years, sat with her until she fell asleep. At 9:15, Junho appeared in the doorway of the sitting room where Domi was eating her second plate of rice and trying not to look like a woman who had not eaten a proper meal in 36 hours. "When you're done," he said, "come to the study." He didn't wait for an answer. The study was at the end of a hallway lined with framed photographs, and Domi cataloged it in 3 seconds. Large desk, 2 chairs, bookshelves that had actually been used, a window overlooking a garden that was dark now. Junho was already seated. He had a folder open in front of him. There was a second chair positioned across from him and a glass of water on the corner of the desk closest to it. She sat. She did not touch the water. 90 days, he said. He said it like a meeting had been called and they both already knew the agenda. "You stay in the house, you play the role, you keep her calm and stable. That's the job." Domi looked at him. "You're serious." "I'm always serious." "Don't know your grandmother." "I walked into your house 2 hours ago by accident. I don't know you, and you want me to pretend to be your wife for 90 days. I want you to be present and consistent so that my grandmother's condition doesn't deteriorate faster than it already is." He held her gaze. "What happened in the foyer, what you did, she hasn't settled that fast in 3 months. Not for me, not for the staff, not for anyone." Domi said nothing. "Your own bedroom, a lock on the door. Full access to the estate, staff, kitchen, car, whatever you need. And at the end of 90 days, a lump sum, enough to cover whatever you're running from." He paused. "I'm not asking about your life. You don't ask about mine. This is a transaction. We don't need to make it complicated." She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the man had just handed her a clean way out of the worst week of her life and packaged it as a business deal, and the audacity of that was actually impressive. "You don't even know my name," she said. Something crossed his face. Brief. "Dominique Acaffer, your grandmother called you Domi on the curb. Mrs. Yoon confirmed the rest." He paused. "I know enough." She looked around the room. She thought about the $32 in her account, the eviction notice, the box with Gerald in it, currently sitting in the corner of a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. "What happens if she has a bad day?" Domi asked. "What happens if she doesn't know me? What if the whole thing stops working? We adjust." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He said it without apology. "Nothing about this is guaranteed. I'm asking you to try." Domi sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "I want it in writing." He opened the folder and slid a single sheet across the desk. She looked at it. It was already written. She picked up the pen he offered and signed it without reading the full thing, which she knew was stupid. but she was tired and homeless and the bed upstairs was already made. 90 days, she said. 90 days, he said. Neither of them shook hands. The next 2 weeks were a comedy Domi had not auditioned for. She did not know the rules of the world she had walked into. She didn't know which staff handled which rooms, which car was for which purpose, or why there were 3 different kinds of water in the kitchen. She asked Mrs. Yoon about the water situation on day 2 and got a 4-minute explanation she immediately forgot. She asked again on day 4. Mrs. Yoon answered with the same patience both times, which Domi found both impressive and slightly unnerving. She said the wrong thing constantly. Not cruel things, just real things, in rooms where real things were apparently not the norm. At a dinner on day 9 with 2 of Junho's associates, one of them asked her how she and Junho had met, and Domi, who had not been briefed on a cover story, said, "He wasn't looking where he was going and I happened to be standing there." And Junho, who had been mid-sip, set his glass down very carefully and said nothing. His associates laughed. Both of them. Like they hadn't heard him get teased in years. Junho looked at Domi across the table. She gave him a small shrug that said, "I improvised. It worked, move on." Something moved in his expression and he looked back at his plate. Mrs. Yoon mentioned to Domi the next morning, quietly and with no context, that she had not heard Mr. Seo's associates laugh at dinner in a long time. Baki watched all of it. Every meal, every hallway moment, every exchange. She watched with her hands folded in her lap and an expression that belonged to someone whose plan was on schedule. Nobody asked her what the plan was. That was their first mistake. On the morning of day 22, Baki walked out of the estate at 5:47 a.m. while the house was asleep. Nobody saw her go. The front camera caught her at the gate's pale green jacket, low heels, handbag looped over one arm, walking at the careful, deliberate pace of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. By the time Mrs. Yoon discovered the empty bedroom at 7 and knocked on Junho's door, Baki had been gone for over an hour. Domi was in the kitchen making coffee when Junho came downstairs. She knew immediately from the way he walked, not fast, not panicked, just very controlled in a way that meant he was actively stopping himself from being something else. "She's gone," he said. Domi set the coffee down. "Since when?" "At least an hour, possibly more." He already had his phone out. He was already scrolling through something. "There are a few places she used to go. I'm going to check them." "I'm coming." He looked up. "She knows me," Domi said. "If she's confused and you show up alone, that might not help." She grabbed her jacket off the back of the chair. "Let's go." They went to the park first. Empty. Then a small garden 2 streets over where apparently Baki used to walk with her late husband on Sunday mornings. Also empty. Junho was back on his phone, and Domi was watching his face because she couldn't help it, watching the way he kept his jaw set and his breathing even while his grandmother was somewhere in the city in low heels at 7 in the morning. "There's a bakery," he said. "On Maple. She's mentioned it before." It was 4 blocks away. They walked fast. Domi matched his pace without being asked. The bakery was called Sukya's and it smelled, from the outside, like red bean and warm dough. Through the window Domi could see small round tables, yellow walls, and a corner booth where an elderly woman sat with perfect posture in front of a plate of pastry, talking to the woman behind the counter like they were old friends. Junho stopped walking. Domi heard him exhale just once, just briefly, and then he was pulling the door open. Baki looked up and her face went straight to delight. "Junhoya," she said warmly. "And Domi, come sit. Sukya, these are the ones I told you about." Woman behind the counter, Sukya, who was perhaps 70 with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looked at the 2 of them with open curiosity and a wide smile. "I've heard everything," she said. "Sit, sit." Junho sat. Domi sat. Baki pushed the plate of pastry toward them like they were late and she had been waiting. Sukya came around the counter with her phone already out. "Can I take a photo? She talks about you 2 every time she comes. I feel like I know you already." Domi looked at Junho. Junho looked at the phone. He said, "Sure," in a voice that didn't sound sure at all. The photo was taken. Baki beamed at the center of it like she'd arranged the whole morning. Sukya posted it before they finished their tea. They were somewhere on the drive home, Domi on her phone watching the like count on Sukya's post climb past 12,000 when Baki fell asleep. Her head drifted sideways and landed on Domi's shoulder. Her right hand, resting between them on the seat, found Junho's wrist and wrapped around it loosely without waking up. Domi went still. Junho went still. Neither of them moved or spoke. The city passed outside the windows. 17,000 likes by the time they reached the gates. Then Junho said, quietly, without turning his head, "Thank you for coming with me." That was all. 6 words. He didn't look at her when he said it. Domi kept her eyes on the window. She didn't trust her voice enough to use it. But something in her face shifted, briefly, without her permission, and she was glad he wasn't looking. She was less glad when she glanced over and found that he had been, after all. A few days later, it started because Domi noticed Baki's toenails. She wasn't looking for anything. She was just sitting on the floor of the sunroom hemming a pair of trousers Mrs. Yoon had asked her to hold while she pinned them, and Baki came in wearing house slippers and sat in the big chair by the window, and when she crossed her ankles, Domi saw them. "Grandma," she said. She had started calling her that somewhere around week 2 without deciding to. "When did you last get a pedicure?" Baki looked down. That's not an answer. It's been some time." "Time like 2 months or some time like the previous administration." Baki laughed, a real one, short and sharp. "Rude child. I'm going to do your feet. You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to." Domi was already standing up. "I want to sit there." She found a basin in the bathroom, Epsom salt in a cabinet that looked like it had been stocked by someone very thorough, and a pedicure kit in her own bag that she traveled with out of habit. She came back, set everything up, and settled Baki's feet into the warm water. Baki sighed like the water had personally apologized to her. "Done this before," she said. "For someone. My mom, every Sunday when I was growing up. She worked on her feet all week." Domi started with the left foot. She said it was the only time she sat down. Mother sounds like a woman who knows what hard work is. She'll tell you about it too, at length, with examples. Baki smiled. "I like her already." They were quiet for a moment. Domi worked. Baki looked out the window at the garden, then Baki said, without preamble, "The boy who hurt you before, was he handsome?" Domi looked up. "What? The one you were with, before all this, was he handsome?" Domi sat back on her heels. "Why does that matter?" "It doesn't. I'm just curious if you at least got something good out of 3 years." Domi stared at her. Then she laughed, a real one, loud enough that it bounced off the sunroom windows. "He was decent looking, nothing that justified the behavior. They never are." Baki shook her head with the authority of someone who had lived long enough to have data on this. "Handsome men who know they're handsome are everybody's problem." "Junho is handsome," Domi said before she could stop herself. Baki looked down at her with an expression that was doing a lot of work. "Yes," she said simply. "He is." "And does he know it?" "I don't think he thinks about it." "Good," she nodded. "That's how you know it won't be a problem." Domi focused back on the pedicure and said nothing else about it, and was very aware that her ears had gone warm. She did Baki's hair after sitting behind her on the arm of the chair, combing through the soft white strands carefully section by section. Baki directed the whole thing. "Part here, not too tight. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard." "You never married?" Baki asked. "No. You wanted to." Domi thought about it honestly. "I wanted someone to want to with me specifically, not just because it was time." Baki was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My husband chose me in front of his entire family when they wanted someone else. He stood up at dinner and said my name, and that was the end of it." She paused. "That was 60 years ago, and I still remember exactly what his voice sounded like." Domi's hands slowed. "Have that," Baki said. "Matter of fact, no drama around it." Domi didn't answer. She finished the last section and smoothed it down and said, "Done, you look beautiful." Baki reached up and touched her hair. Then she reached back and patted Domi's hand where it rested on her shoulder. She held it there for a moment. "I know," she said. And then, small and warm, "So do you." 6 weeks in, Domi had started to believe she understood the rhythm of the house. She knew which mornings Baki woke up clear, and which ones she woke up somewhere else entirely. She knew to bring tea before being asked, to sit close but not too close, to let Baki lead the conversation even when it went somewhere that wasn't real. She had learned the difference between the confusion that passed in 10 minutes and the confusion that needed the whole morning. She thought she knew what she was dealing with. She didn't. It was Mrs. Yoon who noticed first, the empty chair at breakfast, the untouched tea, the bedroom door standing open in a way it wasn't supposed to be. She came to Domi before she came to Junho, which told Domi something about how the house had reorganized itself in 6 weeks without anyone deciding it should. "She's gone," Mrs. Yoon said. Quiet, steady. But her hands were pressed together in front of her. Domi was already standing up. Junho was on a call in the study. Domi knocked once and opened the door. He looked up and read her face immediately. He ended the call mid-sentence. They checked the bakery first. Sukya hadn't seen her. They checked the park near the gate, the small garden, the church on the corner that Junho said she sometimes mentioned. Nothing. They drove slowly through the surrounding blocks with the window down, Junho scanning one side, Domi scanning the other, neither of them talking. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. "She had one shoe," Junho said. He said it without context, like the thought had just reached him. "In the camera footage, she left with one shoe." Domi turned to look at him. His eyes stayed on the street. They found her at the 2-hour mark in a park 12 minutes from the estate. She was sitting on a bench near the fountain, upright, hands in her lap, talking. There was no one beside her, no one nearby. She was talking to the empty air next to her with full attention, nodding, pausing to listen to something no one else could hear. She had one shoe. Her left foot was in a low heel. Her right foot was in a cream-colored sock, slightly damp at the toe from the grass. Domi got out of the car before it fully stopped. She walked toward Baki slowly, not wanting to startle her. Baki didn't notice her at first. She was mid-sentence, hands moving slightly as she talked, and Domi got close enough to hear that she was speaking Korean, fast and low and nothing Domi could follow. Then Baki turned and saw her, her face changed. The animation drained out of it, and what was underneath was not calm. It was frightened, pure and simple and hard to look at. She was a 79-year-old woman sitting alone in a park with one shoe, and she was frightened. She reached up and took Domi's face in both hands. "I couldn't find my way back," she said. Her voice was thin. "I kept walking and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find my way." "I know," Domi said. "I know, I've got you. I couldn't find my way back. I'm here. We're going home right now." His hands stayed on her face for a moment longer. Then she dropped them and let Domi take both of hers, and she stood up slowly, and she leaned into Domi's side as they walked back to the car like she was done holding herself up. Junho had the door open. He took Baki's other arm to help her in, and his hand was steady, but Domi saw that his jaw was tight and had been tight for a while. In the car, Baki sat against Domi and closed her eyes. Domi put an arm around her and held on. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that would fix any part of what had just happened, so she just held on and kept still and let Baki breathe against her shoulder for the whole ride home. Junho sat in the front passenger seat. He didn't turn around. But twice, in the reflection of the window, Domi saw him look back at them in the mirror. The second time, he kept his eyes there longer than the first. Mrs. Yoon got Baki bathed and into bed. Domi sat outside the bedroom door in the hallway until she heard the breathing on the other side of it go slow and even. Then she went to her own room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor. She was still sitting there an hour later when she heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside her door. She looked up. She could see the shadow of his feet under the gap at the bottom of the door. He was standing right there. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She waited. The footsteps started again, slow, moving away down the hall. Then a door at the far end opened and closed. Domi lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling and did not sleep for a long time. In the morning, Junho came down to breakfast at his usual time and poured his usual coffee and asked Mrs. Yoon about Baki's overnight in the same even voice he used for everything. Domi came in 5 minutes later. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said a word about the night before. But for the rest of the day, every time she walked into a room he was already in, he went very still. And she started doing the same. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon with no warning at all. Baki had been good that day. Better than good, she had been present and clear and sharp in a way that happened less and less. At lunch, she had told a story about her late husband that had Domi laughing out loud, and Junho watching his grandmother with an expression Domi didn't have a word for. Afterward, Baki had gone to her sitting room to rest, and Mrs. Yoon had checked on her at 2 and everything was fine, and by 3 she was simply gone. No camera footage at the gate this time, no footage anywhere. She had gone out a side door that was rarely used and they didn't know it until they pulled the full camera log 20 minutes into searching the house. Junho found Domi in the garden and said, "She's not in the house." And Domi was already moving before he finished the sentence. They searched the grounds first, then the street. Then they split up, Domi going east, Junho going west, and covered the surrounding blocks and came back with nothing and split up again. An hour became 2. 2 became 3. Domi was on her phone, mid-call with Mrs. Yoon, when she turned a corner and saw Junho standing on the sidewalk half a block ahead. He had stopped walking. He was standing very still with his phone in his hand and his back slightly turned, and she could see from his shoulders and the set of his neck that something was happening. She ended her call and walked toward him. He heard her coming and turned around, and his face, which she had watched stay composed through 2 escapes, through weeks of uncertainty, through every difficult morning this house had handed them, his face was not composed. He was holding it together by a margin that was getting thinner. "We'll find her," Domi said. "It's been 3 hours. I know, we'll find her." Had one shoe last time. She was in a park talking to no one. "And this time she's been gone 3 hours and I don't." He stopped. He looked away down the street. "I don't know where she is." Domi reached out and took his hand. She didn't think about it. It was not a romantic gesture. She just took his hand because he was standing on a sidewalk coming apart and someone needed to be there and she was the only person present. He looked down at their hands. He didn't pull away. "1 more block that way," she said. "Then we try the church on Elm." He nodded. They walked. The church on Elm was small and old, set back from the street with stone steps and a heavy wooden door that was unlocked. Junho pushed it open and they went in out of the light. It took a moment for their eyes to adjust. Then they saw her. Baki was in the back pew on the left side. Sitting straight, hands folded in her lap, looking toward the front of the church. She was not talking. She was not moving. She was just sitting, quiet and completely still in the way of someone who had come somewhere with a purpose and was still in the middle of it. She heard them come in and turned around. She looked at Junho. She looked at Domi. She knew them both completely, fully, no confusion in her eyes, no searching. She was entirely present. "Halmoni," Junho said. His voice came out lower than usual. "Junhoya." She said it warmly, like he had come to pick her up from somewhere normal. "And Domi, come sit." They sat, Junho on her left, Domi on her right. The church was very quiet, no music, no other people, just old wood and high ceilings and light coming sideways through narrow windows. "We were worried," Junho said. "I know, I'm sorry." She said it simply and meant it. "I just wanted to sit somewhere peaceful for a while. The house is full of people trying very hard. It gets loud, even when no one is speaking." Nobody answered that, because there was nothing wrong with it. They sat for an hour. Baki held one hand from each of them, loosely, like she was not holding on so much as just keeping contact. At some point she closed her eyes, not sleeping, just resting. The light through the windows moved as the afternoon went on. When she was ready, she said, "All right." And they all stood up and walked out together. On the walk home, Baki was between them, and at some point she slowed her pace to look at something in a shop window, and Domi and Junho drifted slightly ahead, and their hands, which had never stopped being connected since that sidewalk, stayed that way. Neither of them said anything about it. Neither of them let go. They walked the last 2 blocks home like that. Baki came up behind them, looked down at their hands, and said nothing. But when Domi glanced over, the old woman was looking straight ahead with an expression that could only be described as satisfied. That night Domi lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about 10 days. 10 days left on the 90. 10 days, and then the lump sum, and then she would pack the same box she came with and go back to her real life, wherever that was now. She pressed her hand flat against her own chest and felt her heart beating faster than it had any reason to. She had not planned for this. She had not planned for any of this, and in 10 days it was going to end. 5 days before the 90 were up, Baki asked them to sit with her in the garden after lunch. She said it at the breakfast table calmly, like she was scheduling something she had planned for a while. "After we eat, the garden, both of you." Then she went back to her tea. Domi looked at Junho across the table. He looked back. Neither of them said anything. It was a good day weather-wise, cool but not cold. The kind of afternoon where the garden got full light and Baki liked to sit near the small stone table by the far wall. Mrs. Yoon brought out a tray with tea and set it between them and then left without being asked, which meant she had been told in advance, which meant this was more planned than it looked. Baki poured the tea herself. She did it carefully, taking her time, not spilling a drop. Then she set the pot down and looked at both of them. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked. At Junho first, then Domi, then back to Junho. Like she was checking something, making sure what she saw matched what she already knew. Then she said, "I was never confused." Garden went completely quiet. Domi heard the words and did not move. Junho went very still beside her. Baki kept going, steady and unhurried, like she had been waiting a long time to say this out loud and was finally saying it exactly the way she meant to. "I know what my mind does. I know which days I lose things and which days I don't. That morning," she paused and reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She took out a small envelope, worn at the edges, the kind that had been opened and closed many times. She set it on the table and smoothed it once with her palm. "That morning I was clear. I saw the car. I told Chansu to stop." Chansu was the driver. Domi had learned his name in week 2. Baki opened the envelope and took out a photograph. She set it on the table and turned it to face Domi. It was old, slightly faded, shot on film. A young woman sitting on a curb somewhere, a city street, nothing remarkable about it. The woman was laughing at something off to the side, completely unaware of being photographed, head slightly turned, mouth open mid-laugh. She looked young. She looked like someone at the tail end of a hard day who had just heard something that surprised her into joy. She didn't look like she knew the photo was being taken. She looked like Domi, not exactly, not a twin, but the feeling of her the way she was sitting, shoulders forward, something tired in her posture but something alive in her face. It was close enough that Domi's chest went tight. "Who is this?" Domi asked. "Someone I knew a long time ago." Baki tapped the edge of the photo gently. She was sitting on a curb outside her building. Her husband had just asked her to leave. She had a bag and nowhere to go, and she was sitting there deciding whether to cry or not. She looked at Domi. "I sat down next to her. We talked for 2 hours. I don't know what became of her after that day, but I never forgot that face." Domi couldn't speak. "When I saw you," Baki said, "I didn't recognize your face. I recognized the feeling. The bottom of a very bad day that a person doesn't yet know is actually the beginning of something." She folded her hands on the table. "So I sat down." Junho had not moved. Baki turned to him. Her voice stayed level. "I found her for you because you wouldn't have found her yourself. You have spent your whole life waiting for someone who would see you past all the rest of it. The money, the name, the face you put on in every room. And you would have kept waiting because you decided long ago that wanting that was asking for too much." She said it without cruelty and without softness, just as a fact, direct and plain. "I'm your grandmother." "I know you." Junho said nothing. His jaw was tight. Then she looked at Domi. "And you got in the car because somewhere you already knew. You didn't get in because you were desperate, though you were. You got in because something in you recognized something in me, and you have spent so long not trusting that feeling in yourself that you called it a terrible decision the entire ride just so you wouldn't have to admit it." Domi's eyes were burning. She was not going to cry. She pressed her feet flat against the ground. "I'm old," Baki said simply. "And my mind is going, I know that too. I wanted to say this while I still could say it the right way." She picked up her tea and took a sip. "That's all." That was all. The garden was completely still. A bird moved in the tree near the wall. The tea steamed. Nobody spoke for a long time. That night Domi lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. 4 days left. She could hear from 2 doors down that Junho was awake too. No footsteps, no sounds. Just the quality of the silence that comes from someone lying still in the dark with too much to think about. Neither of them mentioned the 90 days. Not once. Not all evening, not at dinner, not now. But they were coming, and both of them knew it. The event was small, a private dinner for a charitable foundation Junho's company had supported for years. 40 people, a rented room in a hotel downtown, round tables with white flowers. Loki, Junho had said. Routine. Domi wore a deep burgundy dress that Mrs. Yoon had quietly arranged to appear in her wardrobe 2 days prior. She had not asked for it. She had put it on because it fit, and because there was no version of her life right now that wasn't strange, so she had stopped flagging the individual strange things. They arrived together. They moved through the room the way they had learned to in 89 days, close enough to be convincing, far enough that Domi never forgot what the convincing was for. Junho talked to people. Domi stood beside him and talked to people. A woman asked how they met, and Domi said badly. And Junho said she's not wrong without missing a beat, and the woman laughed, and Domi felt the warmth of his arm near hers and moved a half step away. 4 days left. She needed to remember that. The reporter found them near the end of the evening, as people were beginning to move toward the exit. Gail Fontaine. She knew the name because Junho had said it once under his breath when he spotted the man across the room, not alarmed, just nodding it. He had press credentials. He had a small camera on a rig and a colleague with a directional mic. He came at them sideways, smiling the way people do when they want to seem casual about something they've planned. Mr. CEO, congratulations on the foundation's milestone. Your company's contribution has been, the numbers speak for themselves. He glanced at Domi. And this must be my wife, Junho said. Easy, practiced. He had said it hundreds of times in 89 days. Of course. Fontaine smiled wider. He looked at the camera. Then he looked back at Junho, and the casual dropped just slightly, just enough to show what was underneath it. I have to ask, you're a private man. This is a public evening. People have seen you together, the photo from the bakery, the event last month. He paused. Do you love her? The question landed clean and clear with nowhere to go. Domi felt Junho's arm shift slightly against hers. She kept her face still. 1 second, 2, 3, she counted them. She felt every single one. Junho did not speak. She could feel him, could feel the words somewhere inside him. She knew they were there. She had seen them in his face for weeks in the garden and the church and every quiet hallway moment. She knew he had them. He did not say them. The camera was running. Fontaine waited. The silence stretched past the point of passing for composure and became something else, something that looked, on camera, like a man who did not have an answer. Domi smiled. She turned to Fontaine and said, We appreciate the kind words about the foundation. And she touched Junho's arm once, brief and light, and she moved the conversation forward. She smiled for the rest of the evening. She was very good at it. She had been doing it her whole life, smiling through the moment when someone showed her what she actually was to them, tucking it away, staying upright, staying functional. She didn't say anything on the ride home. Junho didn't either. The silence was different from their usual silences. Their usual silences were comfortable, or at least neutral. This one had weight. She went upstairs. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at Gerald on the windowsill, the cactus she had carried into this house in a cardboard box on the worst day of her life, and she thought very clearly, without drama. She was not going to wait. She had never once in her life been someone's first choice, and she had spent years trying to be patient about it, and patient had never once paid off. She was not going to stay in a room waiting to find out if this time was different. She pulled the cardboard box from the back of the wardrobe. She packed carefully, Gerald, the mug, her mother's phone, the things she had come with. She added the clothes she had arrived in, the ones she had been wearing on the curb. She left the burgundy dress hanging in the wardrobe because it wasn't hers. She was done before midnight. She left before 1. She did not leave a note. Junho found her room empty at 6 in the morning. He stood in the open doorway and looked at the made bed and the cleared windowsill and the wardrobe hanging open, and he stood there for a long time. The burgundy dress was still there. He turned around and went downstairs and got his keys. He had spent the whole night finding the words. He was not going to lose another hour. Domi was staying at Jada's apartment. She had been there 2 nights, sleeping on the pull-out couch, telling Jada she was fine and telling herself the same thing with slightly less success. She was on her 3rd cup of coffee on the 2nd morning when her mother called. "There is a man at my house," Adiz said, without greeting. "A Korean man. He says he knows you. He's sitting in my living room right now drinking the water I gave him because I was raised with manners, Dominique, unlike apparently some people who don't tell their mothers when something is happening." Domi set the cup down. "How did he find your house?" "He said he asked your friend Jada. He said she told him you wouldn't answer if he called first." A pause. "She's right, isn't she?" Domi said nothing. "Come," her mother said. "Or don't. But I'm going to feed him either way because he looks like he hasn't slept, and I'm not running a house where people sit hungry." She went. Unho was on the couch when she walked in. He was upright, both feet on the floor, hands on his knees, and he was in the middle of being looked at by Adiz from the armchair across the room with the full, unblinking attention of a woman who had raised 2 children alone and had no time for anything that wasn't real. He stood up when Domi came through the door. She stopped. They looked at each other across the living room. "Give us a minute," she said to her mother. "Be in the kitchen," Adiz said, meaning she would be 6 feet away with the door open. Domi sat. Junho sat. She waited. "I froze," he said. "I know that's not enough of an explanation. I'm going to give you the real one." He looked at her directly. "I have spent my entire adult life performing for rooms. I know how to handle questions, how to handle cameras, how to say the right thing in the right amount of words. And when he asked me that question, I had the answer. I knew what I felt. But standing there with a camera running and people watching, saying it out loud felt like..." He stopped. "It felt like handing someone the one real thing I had and not knowing what they'd do with it, so I didn't say it. And I knew the moment I didn't that I had just done the worst thing I've ever done in a room." Domi looked at her hands. "I've been left by everyone I've chosen," she said. "Every single one. And I know that's not your story to carry, but that's what was standing in that room with me when you went quiet. Every single time I came second to something else. I know. You don't get to freeze when it counts and then show up at my mother's house and have it be fixed. I'm not here because I think it's fixed. I'm here because I couldn't not come." He said it plainly. "I don't have a speech. I don't have a plan. I just need you to know what's true. And what's true is that you are the first person I have ever been around who treated me like a person in a room and not a position. And I let you walk out without saying that out loud, and I'm not going to let that be the last thing." The kitchen. Something sizzled. Adiz was cooking with the door wide open and not pretending otherwise. Then her brother Kofi appeared in the hallway. He was 26 and built like he'd played football in college, and he looked at Junho with an expression that was not hostile but was not warm. "The guy," Kofi said. "Yes," Junho said. "Do you know what you're doing?" "I'm working on it." Looked at Domi. She gave him nothing. He went back down the hallway. He came back 4 minutes later. "Do you know what you're doing?" he said again. "Kofi," Domi said. "I just want to make sure he's thought about it." "Has," Junho said. "I've thought about nothing else for 2 days." Kofi nodded slowly. Then he left again. Aunt Ngozi arrived at noon without being called, which meant Adiz had called her. She came in, looked Junho up and down once, went to the kitchen, and came back with 2 bowls of pepper soup. She put one in front of Junho and stood back and watched. He picked up the spoon. He ate it. His eyes watered on the 3rd spoon, and he did not stop eating and did not say a word about it. Ngozi picked up her bowl and went to the couch and sat down. "Okay," she said, to no one in particular. Adiz interrogated him for 40 minutes at the kitchen table while Domi sat in the corner saying nothing. She asked about his family, his work, his grandmother, what he believed, what he wanted, whether he understood what kind of woman her daughter was. He answered every question without managing it, without performing it, without making himself sound better than he was. When Adiz asked why he had stayed silent at the event, he said, "Because I was afraid." And he didn't add anything to it or explain it away. Adiz looked at him for a long time after that. Then she got up and refilled his water. That evening, Domi walked him to the door. They stood on the front step. "I'm not going to tell you it won't happen again," he said. "I don't know that. I know I don't want it to. I know I want to be the person who says the true thing out loud even when it's hard." He looked at her. "I'm asking if you'll stay. Not for 90 days, just stay." She looked at him for a long time. "Yes," she said. Baki passed 6 weeks before the wedding, peaceful in her own bed in the early morning. Mrs. Yoon was with her. Domi flew back to the estate the same day. She went upstairs to Baki's room and sat in the chair by the window for a while. Then she opened the nightstand drawer to look for something to hold onto, anything, and found the envelope. The same worn envelope from the garden. The photograph was inside. She turned it over. On the back, in handwriting that was careful and slightly uneven, 4 words. "I knew. I chose." Domi sat in that chair for a long time. The wedding was small. 40 people. A room full of white flowers and afternoon light, and an officiant who kept having to pause because someone in the front row was crying. That was Adiz. She cried from the processional to the final word and did not apologize for any of it. Kofi cried during the vows and spent the reception telling anyone who asked that he had something in his eye. Both eyes. Repeatedly. Ngozi did not cry. Her eyes were red for the entire ceremony, and she looked at anyone who glanced at her with an expression that ended the conversation immediately. At the front of the room, to the left of where Junho stood waiting, there was a chair. It was dressed in white flowers, small ones, the kind Baki had grown in the estate garden. On the seat sat a single framed photograph. A young woman on a curb, laughing at something off to the side, completely unaware of being seen, looking like she had no idea that the rest of her life was about to begin. When the doors at the back of the room opened and Domi came through them, Junho's face did what it had been doing since a curb on a Tuesday, since a foyer with a cardboard box, since a church on Elm Street, since a garden where an old woman said things that were true and then picked up her tea. The thing he used to lock back down. This time he let it stay. He didn't move to fix it or manage it. He just stood there and let her see it completely. She walked toward him and he didn't look away once. The chair to the left held its photograph and its white flowers, and it was not empty. Anyone in that room who had known Yoon Baki could feel that clearly. She had made her decision on a curb on an ordinary morning, and she had sat down and she had held a stranger's hand. And everything that followed, every escape, every church pew, every garden truth, every loud Nigerian American living room had come from that one choice. She had known. She had chosen. And she had not been wrong. You've made it to the end of this story. Drop a comment and tell me, has anyone ever seen something in you before you saw it in yourself? Someone who showed up at exactly the right moment and changed the direction of everything. And if this story stayed with you, like and subscribe. There's so much more to come.